does this look like the money supply is under control? This blue line here is the total money supply created by banks. And this is what's happened since 1970. It was almost flat for nearly 100 years. And in fact, in the Second World War, when there was a lot of money created to pay for, one of the biggest wars that we've ever seen, the biggest, the money supply only jumped from about 1 billion to 7 billion. And then since then, it's jumped from the 7 billion up to 2,200 billion. So can you possibly argue that this is under control? Okay. So what do the banks do with the money? Well, another defense of the current system. I mean, banks are surely the best people to decide where to invest the money that they're creating. They understand risk. Sorry, I take that back. They have local bank managers that understand what the business is doing. I'll take that back as well. But this is the fairy tale of banking, which you still hear in the press and you still hear in economics undergraduate courses. Banks take money from savers like my grandmother, like anybody who's saving up for their pension, and they then go and invest it in businesses. And that helps the economy grow, and it creates jobs, and it means we all get richer as a result. So two types of lending that a bank can do. There's productive lending into things that will actually grow the productive capacity of the economy. Now, this is not productive in this sense, doesn't mean that the loan's going to be repaid or that it was a wise decision to make the loan. It means that it will actually increase the amount of stuff and services that we can produce as an economy. And then there's the non-productive lending, which is things like housing, things like speculating in the financial markets. This doesn't actually increase how much stuff we have. It doesn't create new houses. It just makes existing houses more expensive. So we're going to do a quick quiz. Okay, what percentage of bank lending do you think goes to business? 50%, 22%, 8%, or 75%? 8. This is absolutely correct. 8% of bank lending goes to productive businesses. Good. The other thing as well is that all that unproductive lending, all this property and speculation lending, doesn't add anything to growth. So when you hear about the economy's in recession, we declined 0.1% last year, or we've grown by 0.1%, which actually I think means that somebody found a fiver down the back of the settee and spent it. Well, none of the bank lending that goes into unproductive lending will increase growth. Only this here will actually increase growth. Only that will actually really create good jobs that aren't, just pure speculation. Okay, so this is what they do with the money they create. They pump a lot of it into housing. We'll hear a lot more about this afternoon, but this is what average house prices have done since 1952 when my grandparents bought a house. The average house back then was about £1,800. It's now about £188,000 and rising again. Now, bearing in mind that they are creating up to £3,800 per adult and pumping that into the system, this is some of the other things that they do with it. They invest some of it in military, basically in building bombs, things like BAE Systems and the other big defense contractors. They use some of it for commodity speculation. Now, commodity speculation quite often is just gambling on the price of food. And there's a strong argument that this is pushing up the price of food in developing countries and basically starving people who are living on, $1 a day. So it's sending millions of people into poverty. How many people here have got a pension? Quick show of hands. It's a decent number. You might have some savings in an ISA in your bank as well. It's quite possible that your bank is using your savings to go and gamble in the markets and speculate on the value of stocks, and that might actually be demolishing the value of your pension. So they could even be using your money to gamble against you. They invest in oil. We have environmentalists who put their money into the bank thinking it's going to be kept safe, and then it could be used to actually fund investment in oil and things that are destructive to the environment. And Canadian tar sands, very controversial project of getting oil out of the ground in Canada, which is basically tearing up an area of Canada the size of the UK. What about mergers and acquisitions? There's a lot of guys in the city who are looking at how you can merge businesses together, get one of them to buy up another one, and the two businesses together will be a better business. There'll be synergies. They'll be more efficient. They'll have more market share. Surely that is part of the productive economy. Well, KPMG themselves, who depend on a lot of these mergers for their revenue, in 2001, okay, I'm not going to tell you the answer. What percentage of mergers do you think destroy shareholder value, actually make the business a worse business than it was before? 25%, 37%, 52%, 70%. Excellent. You guys are yeah. So KPMG, who actually depend on these mergers for their income, came out and said 70% of these mergers actually make the business worse than it was before the merger. And you have guys in the city who are sat there looking at businesses, and it's not really a case of whether these businesses go well together. It's can we convince the boards that they should go for a merger so that we can advise them and provide the money and get the £15 million commission for ourselves. So a lot of this activity in the city is parasitic. So why is there this bias against lending to businesses? Well, think about it. You're a bank. You can lend on a property, and if that property loan goes bad, if the person doesn't repay you, you can repossess the property. Now, if you lend to a business, there's usually very little that you can repossess. I mean, if it's a sandwich shop, there may be a bit of equipment there. If it's a service business, the chances are there's absolutely no real physical assets that you can repossess and sell. So the risk on a business loan is much higher. There's also the Basel Capital Accords, which build in, without going into the details, they give banks a systematic bias towards lending for property. It makes it more expensive to lend to businesses. There's also the fact that your average business loan might be 30 to 100,000. Your average mortgage these days is going to be 188 to £250,000. So it costs even more administration to make a loan to a business. Going through the business plan, speaking to them, see if they know what they're doing. Whereas with the housing loans, a lot of it's automated. So the actual cost of arranging that loan is much lower for the property. So basically, banks are systematically biased towards lending for property. And this is really quite a fundamental problem because the capitalist system, the idea is that money will flow to productive businesses. And actually what we've got now is a system where the banking sector actually doesn't want to lend to the productive part of the economy. And that's going to lead to the system collapsing. So this is why you have so much unemployment, so much joblessness, because banks just don't invest in productive business. Only 8% of it goes into that. The other 92% goes into the gambling and the speculating that's blown up the economy and led to all this unemployment. Okay, so the three key answers to those three key questions that we had before. It's banks that create money. They create up to about £266 billion a year, although it's about £100 billion a year at the moment. And they pump most of it into property bubbles and speculation. So this is how far we are away from the textbook model of banking. Okay, so the consequences. Firstly, it means that when we allow banks to create all our money through lending as they do at the moment, it means that the entire money supply is effectively on loan from the banks. So basically, we have to get all this money from the banks by going into debt to them, and then we have to pay interest on all of that back to the banks. So we're effectively, between all of us as members of the public, we're paying interest on every single pound in the economy, pretty much. But we're basically renting the currency from the banking sector. This is really a privatized currency. More importantly, it means that if banks don't lend, then there will be no money in the economy. And there's another implication of this. If we all start paying down the debt, as David Cameron advised us to do the other day, it means that the money supply will start shrinking. There'll be less money in the economy. That's going to be a big problem. If there's less money, it's like sucking the lifeblood out of the system, and people start losing their jobs, the economy slows down, and we have a recession, as we have right now.